PTSD, depression, and all sorts of cognitive disorders, these are also cytokine disorders as well. And so I would love to just start there and unpack that because I've never thought of them as cytokine disorders.
Sure. So I want to just be upfront that knowledge is infinite, and everything we know is just a clearing in a forest, an infinite forest. So there's certain, I don't know if that's really an environmentally sound metaphor, but anyway, I've only cleared a certain area of knowledge. And I've done a lot more work in understanding the molecular roots of cancer and certain inflammatory disorders, including the most acute, which is sepsis. So our work does overlap with cognitive disorders, and here's how we view it. So anytime you're under stress, I'll take a step back and say that in our work we study specific diseases, but we also study evolutionary biology, because everything that exists in terms of health and disease has its roots in evolutionary biology. And anytime we're under stress, there's a molecular response to that goes all the way back to when we were in danger of being ripped apart by predators. And so the stress response that we have in a challenging situation at work or with our significant others or family, that stress response evolved to deal with tigers. So it tends to be a really exaggerated response geared toward pathogen control. So the risk when you're under stress, your evolutionary history is that you might get torn apart, and you really need to have a potent inflammatory anti-pathogen response to that pending event. So what happens is the body releases these proteins that are toxic to pathogens. And normally they're delivered in a very precise focal way against a pathogen once it's in your body. But when you're under stress and your body doesn't yet know what that pathogen is going to be, it tends to release these things systemically. And it's known what they are. They're TNF alpha, IL-1 beta, IL-6. They're specific cytokines. And what all a cytokine is the signal molecule of the immune system. So immune cells communicate with each other and with non-immune cells via these signal molecules. And one of the messages that these signal molecules can deliver is a suicide message. It tells an infected cell or an early cancer to kill itself. Now, the problem is when you have a stress response and these cytokines are elevated and there's no specific pathogen, well, they cruise right across. First of all, they damage whatever tissue they touch, including healthy tissue, and they cruise right across the blood-brain barrier. Blood-brain barrier has evolved to filter out pathogens, but it doesn't filter out your own endogenous natural molecules. So these very potent cytotoxic molecules cruise right across the blood-brain barrier and wreak havoc in delicate brain tissue. And that leads to a variety of negative cognitive responses. There's pretty good evidence that plaque formation, for instance, in Alzheimer's is a protective response to elevated cytokines, including TNF alpha in particular. And also that certain situations like PTSD are responses to the trauma, the psychic trauma of combat. So even if the soldier isn't wounded, the wound can happen at a cognitive level based on this rush of inflammatory cytokines designed to protect against a wound that might not actually occur. So that's some of what we're interested in. Now, we aren't developing NaNots to target cytokines to treat these cognitive or neurological disorders just because it's a lot harder to do that than to target specific diseases like arthritis, rheumatoid like rheumatoid arthritis or psoriasis, these well-characterized inflammatory diseases. But the thing that's cool is the targets are the same. So our work is focused on developing NaNots, which are nanoparticles that absorb pathogenic molecules from blood. And this is at the molecular roots of disease. So it can treat specific diseases, or they can be applied to future applications like the ones you mentioned.